We'll give it 1 minute. Yep, we'll give one more minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. We know that other people will be joining us throughout, and we welcome everybody. And if we could go to the next slide.
Welcome, everyone. I'll just be reviewing the Zoom technical slide real quick. The presentation slides will appear in the main window while the speaker will appear in the top corner. At the bottom of the screen is the menu bar. Here you will find the chat, raise hand, Q&A, and closed caption functions. Please use the chat box to report any technical issues you are experiencing. We will respond to these concerns as they come in. Next to the chat box is the raise hand feature. You'll be able to use this during the Q&A/comment segment to let us know when you'd like us to unmute your mic so you can ask a question. Another way you are able to submit a question or comment is the Q&A box itself, where you can leave your questions at any point during the webinar for the presenters to address during the open discussion at the end. Now I'll pass it back to Dr. Payment.
Okay, and with that, I would like to ask if we have a volunteer to open us in a good way. Just raise your hand and we'll unmute you. And if we don't get a volunteer, Larry, would you be willing to do our opening?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Aho wakanda dena daho udani. Idado udake ahigi wadakte. Alida ha degon. Ombale wadakte isti wibla ha shidade. Si dego wongile agati te wibla ha shidade. Tonkungazi bluga don wagidaga. Nyoshinga ukeli wongile ekitaha walombaga. Nyoshinga wanoshe hili esti daida de kombega. Adeju bakti agati da on wagidaga. Great Spirit, Creator, it's good to pray to you. We thank you for all that you have given us. We thank you for this day. Thank you for allowing each of us to be here today. I ask special prayers for my Ponca people, and say special prayers for all of our tribal nations, all of our native people. Say a special prayer to for our veterans and their families, and ask that you have pity on us and let us come before you in a humble way. We thank you for all the blessings that you give our native people. Gatega Wiblahan Sheno. Thank you.
Awesome. And I want to recognize our veteran, Larry Wright, and also a very strong advocate for Indian country, Ogichita, both in his former role as chairman of his tribe, the Ponca tribe, but also as an excellent executive director for the National Congress of American Indians. Larry.
Thank you, Dr. Payment. Aho Ponca Moshe Wongide, Ombele, Wiki de go. They know how to Wiblahan. Ponca Moshe, Lashmahan, De Wanoche, Larry Wright Jr., Ijajik de Abdi, Wishti, Usni Ponca Bli, Wakpanik de, Wongi de, Wibli Stuba, Wible Juba de, Dengo, Ado Nyoshinga, Ish Age, Wonujige, Adida Devligi, the all the Didaga, Wiblahan, Thank you for allowing me to speak here today. My name is Larry Wright Jr. I'm a citizen of the Ponca tribe in Nebraska. My Ponca name is Buffalo Spirit. I come from the Buffalo clan. And again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, taking time out of your busy schedule, and just an honor to have this series and continue to do the work that NCAI has done for decades and get out the vote and civic engagement. And we're really excited about some of the things that we're doing now to try and make sure that we're elevating and being a good partner for organizations and for Native people that are doing so much great work on the ground and where they live in their communities on every level of this important election, not just from the president and Congress, but at the state level, at the local level, and knowing how important that is for our tribal people across this country. And the next thing we have is a short introduction from President Mark McCarl of NCAI.
Miyuyam. My name is Mark McCarl, President of the National Congress of American Indians and Tribal Chairman of the Pechanga Band of Indians. Welcome to NCAI's Get Out the Vote webinar series. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the Snyder Act of 1924, which granted U.S. citizenship to America's first people. Voting is likely one of our most consequential constitutional rights. This webinar will serve as a vital tool for tribal leaders on how to mobilize our tribal citizens. The Native vote can be the deciding vote this election. Be the margin of victory, honor the past, and prepare for the future. Thank you.
We thank President McCarl for doing that for us. Next, I'm very excited to turn this over to Dr. Payment, who's been designated as NCAI's Get Out the Vote campaign manager, doing exciting work. And so with that, Dr. Payment, turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. So what we plan to cover tonight, I'm going to do our agenda overview. We're going to discuss the importance of exercising our right to vote. And again, as President McCarl said, we can be the margin of victory. Larry's going to do a deep dive on agenda setting and establishing a sovereignty ticket platform. Then I'm going to cover some policy issues that are important to tribal nations. And then we're going to discuss and try to excite you about mobilizing and activating your tribal nation citizens. Then we're going to have the tribal leader discussion. We have a small group tonight, but a small and mighty group. So we hope to have a real lively discussion, share some ideas about what you're doing in Indian country, and give you some ideas about what you could also be doing. And then we'll have our final and closing comments. Next slide. So I want to just describe what this contract is, this work that we're doing. The National Congress of American Indians reached out to Kaufman and Associates. We are a Native woman-owned company, 100% Native woman-owned. Joanne Kaufman is our president. She's a citizen of the Nez Perce tribe, and she talks about doing work that matters for Indian country. And so a long tradition of that. But the purpose of this project is to urge tribal nations and their citizens to register to vote, to urge Natives to vote for candidates who support the treaty and trust obligation, to appreciate the role that campaigns and elections have in setting the agenda. And then the deliverables are a launch video and trusted messenger videos. We're really excited. We have some Native celebrities that will be our trusted messenger videos. So we can't wait to be able to show those to you in the next couple of days. We worked on, part of the project was to work on a refresh of the NCI Native Get Out to Vote website. As Larry said, this is a long time project that NCI has provided a hub activity for other Native orgs to work collaboratively, and we will be reaching out to other Native orgs as we proceed. But we refreshed their website and have lots of exciting and new products on there. We are doing this webinar and information sessions as requested. We are developing a training guide for tribal leaders if they request to be able to try to excite the local media, local and regional and state level media, and also national media to cover Indian country, because we are a factor and we will be the determining factor in this election. And then also disseminating the NCI toolkit. So we refreshed NCI's toolkits. And a little bit later, Larry will explain some mini grants that NCI is intentional about putting together. It's one thing to urge tribes to engage, but it's another if we can provide the resources to help tribes to mobilize their citizens to vote. And so there's some really exciting things coming that NCI can share with regard to mini grants. Okay, so next slide. So, I'm going to ask a couple of rhetorical questions here, and then we'll go one by one. Why should American Indians vote? Does my vote really matter? Does voting diminish tribal sovereignty? I remember that in the 1990s where some Native people were saying that by voting in federal elections, it somehow diminishes our sovereignty. And then should I vote D for Democrat, R for Republican, or how about I for Indian? Is it too late to register to vote? How do I register? Where do I vote? And how about absentee voting? All of this is covered in our refreshed website, which we'll talk about. So when tribes sign treaties ceding nearly 1 billion acres of Indian land in exchange for provisions of health, education, and social welfare into perpetuity, our ancestors secured a commitment for funding federal programs and services forever. While these rights are generally upheld through judicial precedents, they depend entirely on who is in elective office. While American Indian Alaska Natives were granted citizenship, as Larry mentioned 100 years ago with the Center Act, a guaranteed right to vote didn't come until the 1964 Civil Rights Act was enacted. Even today, we have challenges with voter suppression, but it is our solemn duty to vote, and so we please ask you to exercise your right. Yes, your vote matters. President Kennedy won his election in 1961 by just over 100,000 votes, which is an average of 1 vote per precinct. The 2016 presidential election in Michigan was decided by just over 10,000 votes. The number of American Indians in Michigan in 2020 was nearly 110,000. So 110,000 vote victory, 110,000 American Indians. You can see that we are a factor. We can be the margin of victory. You get to decide who is president and who controls the House and the Senate. Let your vote be for candidates who support a tribal sovereignty ticket. All of the work that we do is nonpartisan, so we're looking for candidates that support us. Voting does not diminish your tribal sovereignty. Just as most Americans can vote in local, state, and federal elections, so too can Native Americans, but we have another level of citizenship and representation through our vote. If you vote in favor of candidates who have a platform supporting the treaty and trust obligation, you strengthen our sovereignty. If you prioritize the impact of the federal government on tribal sovereignty and the federal funding, as Indians, we win. Who you vote for is entirely up to you. You are encouraged, however, to research candidates and then ask the tough questions of how they will serve you as an American Indian. It's not too late to register to vote, but this varies based on jurisdiction. Please go to our website at nativevote.org to learn more on how to register in your respective state, how to secure absentee ballots, and where to vote in person. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk about, just kind of dive a little bit deeper into how we can be the margin of victory. The close margins in the last 2 presidential elections suggest that the lack of a Native-focused campaign in 2016 and courting the Native vote in 2020 may explain, how battleground states turned from red to blue and decided the election. Data shows on this slide that the proportion of Natives is multiples greater than the win or loss in these respective battleground states. Michigan, for example, was won in 2016 by less than 0.2%. Again, that's 10,000 votes. While the proportion of voters who are Native in Michigan is 2.3%. And in 2020, Michigan was won by 2.8%. In Arizona, for example, in 2016, the margin of victory was just over 4%. The proportion of Natives in Arizona is 16%. In 2020, Arizona was won by 0.3%. We are definitely a factor. The same battleground states are in play, as you can see on this slide. With polls within the margin of error, this means the Native vote may just decide the 2004 or 24 presidential election. So if you look at these slides in North Carolina, the percentage of natives is multiples greater than the margin. Currently with the polling, in Wisconsin, the proportion of natives is multiples greater than the margin of difference between who's in the lead right now. And the same is true for Arizona, Michigan, and Nevada. Also in Colorado and North Carolina. I already said North Carolina, I'm sorry. So we can definitely be the difference if we register and if we put expectations on candidates so that they campaign in supporting platforms that benefit American Indians. So next up, Larry Wright is going to discuss what a tribal sovereignty ticket looks like and how do we motivate candidates to adopt a tribal sovereignty ticket.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Payment. And just to kind of build off of that last slide showing how close that is and that the native vote does count. I'm reminded of my old teaching days. I used to be a high school government and civics teacher, and one of the things that I talk to my classes about that I think is still pertinent here. It's an old quote, over 100 years old, but essentially the quote is, "Bad officials get elected by good people who don't vote." And when we talk about all of the list of things that are important to Indian country, specifically, as we talk about a sovereign ticket platform, it is crucial that we're making sure that we do everything that we can to help our people understand the importance of voting and the critical nature and what it means for Indian country, and to have candidates, regardless of party, that will support those issues and protect our sovereignty and through all the things that Dr. Payment listed. But as we know, the relationship between the federal government and tribal nations has been reaffirmed through Supreme Court judicial precedent, legislation, and administratively through executive orders, presidential memoranda, and proclamations. But to fully honor the treaty and trust obligation in exchange for the nearly 1 billion acres of ceded Indian lands, funds appropriated by Congress, the fulfillment of this great promise should be advance appropriation, mandatory rather than discretionary funding, and those should not be subject to sequestration restrictions imposed by and including OMB budget ceiling. Indian country funding should not be affected by federal funding uncertainties during budget negotiations or under continuing resolutions. And this is going to be another issue for us as we look to the end of September, when another likely continuing resolution needs to be considered to have that funding continued for the federal budget. But achieving the classification as mandatory funding can be a significant challenge. However, in December 2022, Congress voted on advance appropriations for the Indian Health Services funding, which was 11 years in the making, being pushed by multiple organizations in Indian country. But moving Indian country from discretionary to mandatory and forward funded programs will truly honor the treaty and trust obligation that the federal government has. NCAI has long collaborated with tribal nations to enumerate tribal infrastructure needs and priorities. In 2017, NCAI testified that the backlog was in excess of $47.8 billion, with a breakdown as follows: $10.3 billion for IHS facilities, $12.5 billion for IHS sanitation, $1.3 billion for BIE schools, $33 billion for Indian housing, and $20 million for multi-justice centers. While the 2021 Jobs and Infrastructure Act afforded record amounts of funding to tribes, the vast majority of our infrastructure needs remain. Land and trust issues. A clean carcieri fix is needed now. As late as 2018, proposed rulemaking would have granted a level of assent to local government to deprioritize tribal land and trust requests. Notwithstanding intertribal conflicts with land and trust issues, a streamlined and pragmatic process subject to less political ebbs and flows is needed. In regards to our sovereignty, NCAI has a critical partner with NARF, and we work hand in hand with them, especially with our Supreme Court project. And while the decisive outcome in Brackeen versus Holland upheld ICWA, threats to sovereignty and jurisdiction remain. NCAI's long partnered with NARF through watchdog court proceedings for possible erosion in jurisdiction and sovereignty. The McGirt decision suggests a positive turn in honoring Indian country jurisdiction. However, impacts of the Oliphant versus Suquamish case remain where tribes lost authority to hold non-Indians accountable for certain crimes on tribal lands. Enactment of laws to stabilize jurisdiction are needed to protect tribal sovereignty and ensure no hold in that jurisdiction. These agenda items and more establish a tribal sovereignty ticket to look for when casting your vote. Next up, Dr. Payment will share a few Indian policy issues of importance to our tribal voters. Thank you, Dr. Payment.
Yes, and so at a previous call, somebody had said suggested that we misquoted the I for Indian. That's a direct quote from Jefferson Keel, who was our former president for NCAI and also lieutenant governor for a long time for Chickasaw Nation. So we are trying to promote a sovereignty ticket despite partisanship, because American Indians, we found, will support candidates who support Indian country. And so that's what we're promoting. And obviously, we would like to coach those candidates to pay attention, realize that we are the margin and that we can make the difference. And we believe that that sovereignty ticket will translate into a federal agenda on whoever is elected, that if they pledge and campaign on our issues, they will be in good fidelity to that and support those issues if elected. And so let's talk about some of those federal Indian policy issues that are important to us. According to the 2018 U.S. Commission on Civil Rights Broken Promises report, American Indian and Alaska Natives are more likely to live in poverty, be unemployed, experience rape or abuse, be killed by police, have an infant mortality rate of 1.6 times that of non-Hispanic whites, have low high school and college graduation, have the highest rates of drug and alcohol addiction, and the highest rates of suicide among adolescents. Also, according to the CDC, American Indian Alaska Natives have the highest rates of heroin and opiate-related deaths. And then a really tragic statistic that came out in 2002, the CDC reported a drastic drop in life expectancy by 7 years for our people, bringing it back 80 years. And so we believe that probably has to do with both the pandemic and also the ongoing epidemic of the opiate crisis and ongoing substance abuse addiction and overdose rates. So it's very serious. And then most recently, in the last couple of years, the investigative report launched by Secretary Holland and overseen by and authored by Assistant Secretary of Interior Brian Newland shine new light on the responsibility of the federal government's instigating generations of historical and intergenerational trauma that explains the worst of the worst outcomes that I just shared. Volume 2 of the Newland report enumerates the cost of forced assimilation at $23.3 billion in present value dollars. Dollar per dollar, this expense is owed to tribal nations to return that which was taken, to heal and confront the systemic impacts and outcomes of federal Indian policy. Returning native languages and cultural ID will be a necessary step toward healing the impact of historical and intergenerational trauma. Let's talk briefly about the Affordable Care Act and the treaty obligation. The 2020 election cycle saw a commitment to expanding the ACA to states which did not accept Medicaid expansion. Since this time, American Indian and Alaska Natives residing in those states were permitted to sign up, but a means test is still used. Fully honoring the treaty and trust obligation for health suggests qualifying American Indian and Alaska Natives for the ACA Medicaid expansion without regard to income, and in creating an IHS portability similar to the VA healthcare portability. This effort stands to significantly increase third-party revenues to tribal health, closing the gap between the $9 billion that is currently budgeted for Indian health services to the $50 billion the IHS budget formulation work group has estimated that we need. So that's 5 times what we currently have. The third-party revenue could close that gap. And so I also want to talk briefly, we have a lot of focus on government-to-government relations and consultation, which is by executive order 13175, President Clinton entered, and most all presidents have issued presidential memos extending it since that time in 2000. But the 2019 GAO report identified a significant proportion federal agencies who have not established consultation protocols with the tribal nations. A presidential memo in 2021 directed all federal agencies to establish consultation policies within 90 days. Remember that saying, be careful what you ask for? I recall doing over 65 consultations when I was tribal chairperson, but we're still not there. Executive orders or presidential memos are only as good as who sits in office. And then Congressman Grijalva's Respect Act draft includes some concerns expressed by tribes. Any draft bill to promulgate consultation should follow consultation with tribes and should be inclusive of tribal input before proceeding. So let me also talk about, it's hotter than heck where I'm at right now. I live in the Northern Territory and it's almost 90 degrees. So the ebbs and flows of who is president should not adversely impact climate resilience. Tribal nations are the first stewards of the land and natural resources. Climate change is real and should not be subject to political ideological shifts. Vast amounts of jobs and infrastructure act funds to confront environmental justice and climate resilience, including potable water and clean energy expansion, should be extended and shielded from recessionary efforts. Further, the backlog of Indian country infrastructural needs should be addressed with an energy independence focus. So look to these and other key policy issues that impact tribal nations and support candidates who support tribes. Again, if these candidates don't know these issues or if they're not already campaigning on them, be that brave soul that raises their hand in a candidate forum or a town hall and asks the question. And in doing so, you can pinpoint and maybe pin down the candidates on what their issues and what do they support that relates to tribes. Okay, next slide. So now we want to excite you. We're going to get you all excited. We want to mobilize your tribal nation and your team members. First of all, I would like to remind you all to go to nativevote.org. So your assignment tonight is before you log off for the day, go to nativevote.org and see the refresh that we've done on NCAI's Get Out to Vote page. So we have lots of tools available for you there. We developed a toolkit that will include some mini grants to help mobilize your citizens, including some direct mail and advertising and promotional materials. We have drafted up a media kit to coach tribes that ask for it on how do you reach out to local media sources and how do you respond to media sources in the best way to get our message across. And then we have lots of fun items that are coming. In fact, I'll share with you my shirt. Larry's a little jealous because I got this. It was a AHEC t-shirt that we designed, NCAI designed, and put these out. And it's the Go Vote Den t-shirts. And so there's all kinds of stuff that's coming. Posters and promotional materials and bling bling that will be available for you to be able to share out in the tribal communities. It's funny how t-shirts get people really motivated, right? I know it motivated me to wear mine. So we would like to hear from you. Now we're gonna switch over to next slide. Oh, wait, no, before we do that, Larry, could you share a little bit about what these mini grants might look like?
You bet. And really to kind of give a little bit of background of how we're able to do this, while we've been able to do this in limited success in the past, we really made this part of the pillar of our new foundation. The foundation for NCAI was launched in November at our annual conference last year. And the whole idea behind the foundation was to really look at a new revenue source that hasn't been completely tapped for Indian country. And by example, last year alone, over $400 billion was spent in philanthropic dollars in the United States alone. And of that amount, less than 0.5% went to Indian country. And almost every funder that we've talked to, we asked, what's your plan to increase that for Indian country? And almost to a person, they said, we don't have one. And so we wanted to create a plan to help Indian country be able to tap into that unmet potential. And in doing so, we wanted to make it clear that we're not trying to replace any funding for any other tribe, any other organization, or anything else. We just wanted to be able to increase what's being done out there for Indian country on behalf of Indian country. And one of the things that we've focused on in that foundation is our civic engagement process and understanding how important this truly is, not just for get out the vote, but when we talk about things like census counts, all those kinds of things, very important for us. But on our nativevote.org website, we have a tab for grants. And those that are eligible to apply are tribal governments, obviously, but Native-led 501c3s and C4s and Native vote collectives. And we have eligible projects that qualify for those grants. And they, several of the different items are increasing civic participation, enhanced capacity of tribal organizations, comprehensive data and analysis tools development, youth and elder engagement programs, strategic coalition building and collaboration, communication and outreach efforts, and increased awareness and understanding of Native vote rights. When we talk about the Native vote rights, we know that this is still under attack. We know that we have to be vigilant in making sure that access to voting does not keep our people from being able to vote. And that's a key partner, as I mentioned earlier, with NARC. But along with all of the things that Dr. Payment said, that we're updating and trying to make sure that we're a better partner, we want to be able to provide groups with the funding that they need to be able to do the work that they're doing. We're not trying to replace anything that those groups are doing. We just want to enhance that, elevate their message, and create a collaborative effort so that all of our groups across the country can come together, share best practices, know what's working in not just the key states, but all of our states, and especially our tribal communities, as we make sure that we're being mindful of that. So we're very excited about this implementation and the partnership that we've had with Kaufman and the work that everybody on the team is doing. But this is just the first step. And we want to make sure that we're listening to Indian country to make sure that we're doing what is needed and what people are looking for. And when you look at that website and you don't see something, please reach out and share that so that we can elevate that and make sure that we're sharing everything and celebrating everything that Indian country is doing. Because as we all know, we might talk to somebody else and they're doing something we haven't thought of yet. But, even to the point of, yes, I am jealous that Dr. Payman has that t-shirt and I don't. But, we've had a group that also put t-shirts out there, and you couldn't get the t-shirt until you actually physically registered to vote, or you could prove that you were registered to vote. And so, just little things like that I'm sure you're all aware of, but, trying to share those kinds of things to really put some meaning behind the effort. So thank you again, open to conversation, open to ideas, and NCAI is here to help and want to make sure that we are the best partner that we can be. Thank you, Dr. Payment.
Awesome. And that actually is perfect segue for having a conversation right now. And Tanya, I'm so glad that you asked that question about materials for the upcoming conference. In fact, Julie Johnson and Patsy beat you to the punch at our last call. They voluntold Larry that he's coming to the conference. He's checking his schedule to see if he's available. But absolutely, so that's what we'll be working on, is getting materials sent out so that we can create that excitement and that hype. But for now, we do want to open it up to a conversation. We do have some prompt questions, but we really want to hear from you. We want to hear what are your general feelings about the election that's happening right now, that's in play. What are your how is your tribal community engaged? Your tribal citizens? We understand the difference between citizens, team members, patrons. Wherever Indian country is, we are usually the largest employer, so we can really have an outreach and impact in our community members as well. And then what efforts are happening in your region that you'd like to share, or what resources do you need? All you got to do is raise your hand, and we will unmute you so that you can join us in the conversation. And do not be shy. Remember, you're representing your ancestors. Let's see, nobody's raised their hand yet. Okay, Kencha. Kencha Chavez. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. We're super excited. I'm with the California Native Vote Project, and just listening to everything that you said, it's really touching because that's the work that we're doing at the California Native Vote Project. We're based in California, but we're also like trying to reach far and wide, statewide, get our community excited to vote. I'm excited about the grant that you mentioned, so I'm gonna see if we can apply for it. Really want to get our community just really excited. You know, their vote counts, and that's something that we keep telling them. Like, we vote because our ancestors couldn't vote, and we're the voice, right? And we're the voice of the future 7 generations. So we do what we do for today is going to impact our relatives, our future elders in the future. And you know, it's just really exciting. We're trying to get the kids on board. I know here you can also start registering at 16, trying to get, you know, our youth, you know, excited to vote, get out the vote. Come on, like, we've got to do this. I like that you shared about also the numbers on how much of an impact that we make, and we do. So to see those numbers and to see that is exciting. And I love your shirt. So those are the things that we're working on as well, trying to get the let's go vote. Yes, let's go vote then. Let's get out there. So those are the things that we're working on. We're working statewide, you know, hitting different areas, not only our, you know, powwows, and but trying to hit local community events as well to get the community, our community, to not only register to vote, but also to capture that data and how many other AIANs are out here in California in urban areas as well.
Awesome. We really appreciate that. That's energizing to hear. And, you know, this is a sharing exercise. And as Larry said, there's lots of efforts that are already happening. So wherever we can bolster and support those efforts and get resources out, that's what we want to do. The mini grants could assist tribes with actually potentially doing some direct mail, some advertising, and just really making sure, you know, California is an amazing place with 109 tribes, and really having a great influence already, but maybe getting even more specific commitments from candidates during the campaign so that we can hold them to it once they're in elective office. So awesome. We appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. Have a
Others?
good night.
Yeah, thank you. Others, ideas, or how can we help? Tom, if you want to advance the slide. So what, you know, another question is, what message resonates with your people? What would you like to see in a national campaign? How can we help again? And what resources do you need? Wait, I'm trying to be patient. I'm not very patient, so I'll have to admit.
Yeah, it just by example, you know, all the things that are on the nativevote.org website are replicable. So as you have events, and if you currently have funding, obviously, you know, it's there to use. You can download the toolkits, you can download the logos. If you decide to make your own shirts, those kinds of things. And so we want to, you know, obviously my staff is not huge, but we want to get the money to where our people are using it. And so all the events that you just listed, Tencha, and what you're trying to do is exactly why we're doing this. We want to support that the best we can, and this really shows, you know, our funders as well how much is needed, and making sure that it's actually getting to where it's needed at. And I just wanted to share that, you know, everything on the website is there, and want you to use it. And if there's questions, you know, we're happy to support how we can, but really want to make sure that you're getting those resources when you need them for your events. And we don't have a long time between now and the election, and we want to make sure that there's no delays for sure.
Awesome. So I'll do one more round to see if there's any final comments or questions anybody has. I think that means we did a good job. So I'm gonna ask Larry if you have anything final comments for us.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, as I said earlier, that this is just the beginning of the conversation. We are truly here to be a partner and one that can be counted on, and really want to elevate everything, all the great work that our people in the communities are doing. And we're not here to replicate any of that. We just want to make sure that we're sharing all of our voices across Indian country, and know that there are many people doing all this great work, and to elevate them and show what a difference Indian country can make. And it doesn't matter, as we said earlier, what party it is, because we need both parties in order to move legislation at the federal level to make sure, and actually at every level, but even more pronounced in Congress, where those bipartisan efforts are very much needed for policies that affect Indian country to get passed. And so, again, we want to make sure that we're elevating that and making sure that that sovereignty ticket is something that we want to continue to push and identify candidates that will support the needs of Indian country.
All right, I'm not trying to rush anybody. I do see Brittany had raised her hand. So I'm gonna ask you to unmute, and then CC Hobie, you can go next. Brittany.
Hi, sorry, I ended up just putting my question in the chat, but it was regarding like where we can get shirts. I always miss out every year, so I want to be prepared this year.
We'll be working on that, and we're trying to find out the best way to do it, and we really think that the best way is for local to get the grant so that you can order the shirts yourself, and that way there's no delay working with us to try and order the shirts to get them for you for what you need. You know how big your events are. And so that's one of the purposes behind the grant, so that you can have those graphics and use a local vendor that you can identify. Ideally it would be a native vendor, but that's not always the case. But just so that whatever you have going on, you make sure that you get those items in the time that you need them.
Perfect.
And Larry had mentioned the mini grants. In the next iteration of the work that we're going to do, we can assist tribes with writing those mini grants to make it really straightforward. The criteria will be very straightforward and easy to fill out, and assist tribes with writing those mini grants so that we can get those resources out to you as quickly as possible.
Perfect. Thank you. And then I have a follow-up question. So if we were to apply and receive a mini grant to purchase the t-shirts, would there be any sort of like logo requirements or any restrictions?
No, the logo, well, the only restriction that it would be a bipartisan event. And so if you're doing something for Democrats, we'd ask that you do something for Republican candidates as well, or make it just about the vote itself. And so that's really the main restriction. Part of the application for the grant is to say what you're doing, what are you using it for, and provide a budget, and then we can adjust from there. And so recently, for example, we had a group that did a get out the vote event at a baseball game, and they themselves they applied for a grant, and they got enough for 1,000 t-shirts, and those t-shirts were given to individuals who could prove that they were registered to vote, or they would register to vote right there at the event. And so they ordered them locally, they had them there, and they dealt with all of that. So that's kind of an example of what we would be talking about, along with the toolkits that you might want to give away as well. And so, you can look at, all right, this is how much it would cost to print those. And I know it's an extra step, but it's also a savings financially for us to be the centralized location and try to order it here and get it out and mailing. And so this way you can kind of control the logistics from beginning to end, so you don't miss any deadlines for yourself. And so that's really the design for these mini grants to do that. And I think that effort was right at $5,000, $6,000. And so, you know, but it was very successful. They were able to give out all the shirts and had a great event. And that's what we want to do and try and do, you know, replicate things like that. As Dr. Payman said before, Indian country loves a free t-shirt and especially one like this. And by the way, that design was done, was a competition among youth, and that was the winner. And so, but it could be that one, it could be logos off the website that are different, and we'll continue to update that as we move forward.
All right, Cece Hovey.
Hi, this is Cece. I am the Association on American Indian Affairs Public Affairs and Communications Director. And I wanted to ask, I'm very excited about the updated, refreshed website. I haven't had a chance to dive into it, didn't realize it had been refreshed, so I'm, again, very excited. But are there any tips and strategies on how to deal with voter suppression on the website, and do your social media toolkits and things like that address that? Because I know that when the association has put things out on social media about voting, there have been comments about the difficulties that people are facing when it comes to voting. So I just wanted to find out if you guys had any strategies to deal with that. Thank you.
So there is some information on the existing website, but we might want to refresh that as well. Larry had mentioned that we work very closely with the Native American Rights Fund. In fact, our chief of staff came from there. And in partnership, both NCAI, and NARF have monitored that and have tried to support pushing out information. We know it's a very serious issue. We know in some cases, states have, like one example in Montana, there was a effort where they were not recognizing tribal IDs, and we believe that might have had an effect on the outcome of the Senate race. And so it is very important. So we will take a look to see if we need to refresh that or highlight it and make it more updated information.
Well, I will share, if you go to the website under the NCAI Voter Action Kit, under the Toolkit tab on page 12 of the Voter Action Kit, we do have some follow-up if there should be some voter suppression, and for things like, you know, common voter suppression laws, and what should I do if I experience or witness voter suppression. And our partners at NARF have a phone number that you can call if you're seeing something local on the ground, and they monitor all of this, and they do want to hear about that. So that's a great question. We just heard about a new law in Arizona that is requiring proof of citizenship in the United States in order to register to vote. And that is going to be an issue for Indian country there. And so those are things that NARF is looking at. But yes, if you go to that voter action kit, there is information on there for you.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else that hasn't had a chance to ask a question or share an idea? Okay, next slide. So we want to thank everybody for joining us. And Larry, do you want to close us out with a thank you?
Yeah, no, thank you very much again. Knowing the work that it takes to be committed to voter registration and get out the vote, and all that entails, from our elders to our youth. And we know that not everybody's engaged, and you know it better than most, where we hear from Indian country especially that says that, you know, this system wasn't designed for us. It's designed to eliminate us. But unfortunately, it's a system that we have, and the strides that have been made in Indian country since the beginning of this country, and in the strides that Indian country has made since the passage of the Snyder Act, although not perfect, we need to work within that system. And the only way that we can change the needle, move the needle, as been shared today, is knowing how close many of these elections are and the difference that Indian country can make. And if we're not willing to take that action, we're going to continue to be left out. We're going to continue to be suppressed in many different ways. We're going to continue to not be funded at the level that this government should be doing because of our treaty and trust responsibility. And so I applaud all of you for the work that you're doing. And like I said, NCAI is here to be a great partner, and we stand ready to help any way we can. So please, if there's questions that you think of after this call, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again. We belong.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Larry, stand for a minute as we conclude.
Okay.